All right. John Lumgair, animation director, filmmaker, other things I'm sure we'll talk about. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
What is new in the world of animation?
Um, there's all sorts of new things. People are always developing new technology. People are always creating new films. Um, I never really know how to answer that one.
Well, I would imagine Jazz Cow is a new thing. No?
Yes. So Jazz Cow is an animated sitcom that I'm working on at the moment. It's um, it's about a jazz playing cow that leads a resistance movement. And that's going up on Kickstarter um, in September. So yeah,
Oh,
that's
September. Okay. What I've looked at your YouTube channel that had a couple things about it, and then your website about it, of the Jazz Cow website that did the, I guess it's a concept. Is that the
yes.
type of animation the whole show is going to be?
Yeah. So the character design, majority character designs are the designs of the characters, and the feel and look of it is the style of the show.
How did you pick the type of animation to use, and what different types are there, I guess? I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, great question. So there's so many different types of animation. So there's obviously the cartoon kind of animation which we've gone for, but there's the 3D computer generated stuff which dominates a lot of the market these days. But then there's all sorts of people that do really interesting things. The Aardman guys use puppets and then like plasticine puppets. Other people use different kinds of puppets. You've got people that paint on glass, people who animate with sand. There are hundreds of different ways that people do things, but we went for it because we wanted to be in that cartoon comedy tradition, like you find in The Simpsons, and you find in Rick and Morty, you find in Warner Brothers stuff going right back. That that 2D feel. Um, and the backgrounds were inspired by all sorts of things from film noir um, to influences, jazz album covers, all sorts of different things.
Yeah, I got the film noir feel, and then some other things that made me think about was kind of like Harry Potter when they were doing, I think it's Harry Potter when they do the animations of like the Elder Wand and explaining that story, had that
Mm,
kind of a little bit of feeling. I mean, it seemed like it was different things working together, so it wasn't just one type. But that's
yes.
just from the outside version or view of somebody that doesn't know all the different types of animation or the way you use it. And then it had the feel of, there's a movie, it's probably in the 80s, maybe 90s, called High Spirits, is about ghosts, but it was a
Okay.
live action, and they had a play where it's kind of the beginning of your concept thing where you have the waves going back and forth and the and other things in the background. It just felt like that that was live action, and in your piece it's animated, but I'm not sure what they call that. It's like you would see at a like an in-person play
Mm,
type. So I like that feel of it, kind of a Anna Karenica type thing,
mm.
if
I've
that's
not seen that.
right. Hmm. You'd like that. I think it's called High Spirits or Free Spirits.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Has Liam Neeson in it as a ghost back before Liam Neeson was had a particular set of skills. So it's pretty old.
He's never going to be able to do anything beyond that now, is he?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not bad. You can have a particular set of skills. So when you started animation, how did you learn how to do it? Did you go to school for it, or is it self-taught, or is it a little bit of both?
A bit of both. So I did go to school for it. Um, by the time, by kind of my stage in history, it had become very unfashionable to teach you the true traditional skills of animation, which was a pity because those are actually really, really useful. So a lot of it's self-taught. well, when people say self-taught, they're learning through watching what other people do. They're learning through books, in more recent years, going on the internet. So self-taught is learning from people, but people
Right.
usually don't know who they are.
So does that mean that what you learn in school or in the formal education part of it isn't what you need to know or how you use what you do?
Yes, certainly in my case, I think different different people have different experiences, but in my case, very much so. They were quite theoretical. They they'd embraced a kind of academic or a particular view of an academic idea of the kind of humanities, which didn't really have a lot of practical use, um,
Hmm.
which is a
So
pity. But
what are some of the old school animation things that you had to pick up outside of the formal education then?
so actually, there are you've got a number of key principles in animation. So you've got um, squash and stretch. You've got things move on arcs. So if you move your arm, it doesn't move straight across, it moves in arcs. You've got timing, so things speed up and they slow down. You've got follow through. So if I move my head, my hair will move at a slower pace and catch up to my head. There's all these kind of principles that are they're kind of basic physics in a way, but these these principles underpin good animation. And then learning to act. So not act as in being an actor, but getting your drawings to be alive, to feel like they are not just drawings, but the character is living and breathing and thinking. And so practicing that, seeing how other people do that. So that it's those kind of principles.
Do you write out a script for your episodes, or is it something you make it on the computer, or how I guess it's on the
Mm.
computer. You do your animation and then you just piece it together and go, okay, this is what's going to happen. And you end up with like a library of movements that you can plug into different scenes.
So so the process is from a written script, like any other script with a kind of this character says this and does this and does this. We move to storyboarding. So in a storyboard, you'd map out the whole story, each scene by scene, and go, oh, that scene doesn't work very well. Take that scene out. That needs redrawing, and kind of map the whole thing out. So you've got your blueprint. And then from that blueprint, you then take each individual scene and then you would then work out, okay, this character walks from the door to the table and then they sit down and then you go and on your storyboard you'd have them at the door and probably sat down and then when you animate it you'd go, okay, this character's going from there to there. What are we putting in between? How and we've got 10 seconds for that to happen in or 3 seconds or whatever the time frame is. So it's actually very, very mapped out at each stage from text right through to the final final animation.
How do you determine your like perspective, or I guess camera work, for lack of a
Mm.
better term?
So and it's an old Pixar phrase, but it's brilliant, which is just story is king. So you're really thinking, what is the storytelling? And so when you're looking at a scene, it needs to be logical. So it can't just be something completely random because the audience will be confused and they won't follow the story. But if you're, say, the character's coming into the room and he's big and imposing, you might shoot him from below, and then that would create slightly more of that imposing feel. Or you might be, oh yeah, this is a really sensitive moment, so you might kind of be much more close into a character. So you're thinking, what is the best way to tell the story? And there are ways. We've seen hundreds of films, and so we've implicitly kind of absorbed the different elements of visual storytelling. So we know that certain things work well. But I'll often do something, and I think, oh yeah, this is a good view. This tells a story best, and then a few days later, I'll see something or feel something and go, actually, I think this can be better. And then I'll redraw it. And it's quite nice because you can redraw a storyboard stage quite quickly and change things without too much effort.
What kind of tools do you need then to do the animation? Do you have like I don't know if it's called a Prometheus board anymore or something like that, or where you can write on a screen, or are you hand drawing it and scanning it in? Or
So we originally used to hand draw and scan everything in, which was a long, laborious process. And I used to just listen to loads of stuff when I did that, which was the fun side of it. But now I draw directly in. So I now have a screen that has a pen attached, and I draw in, and it comes up on the screen immediately.
do you have to draw each frame, or are you using some sort of program that can take that part and move it around some?
So the way I normally create is that I will create a character that it's got like joints. It's got so it's a hand drawn character, but there is, if you like, it's like a puppet made of different parts, and so I'll move those parts, and which is much quicker than drawing it. But there might be an angle where I need to just redraw it, or a different hand position I need to create. So I'll have libraries of things. And yes, so there's a mixture of doing that, if you like, traditionally frame by frame and using the software. But then there's the other thing is that you've got a lot of software will have frame 1 and frame 2, and it'll kind of work out the in between frames. But usually you have to spend a lot of time tweaking that, and I usually go frame by frame at the end of the day, just trying to make things work, to make it just a better animation.
How many frames per second are you doing?
12 is so 24 is the classic cinematic film speed. And for animation, you usually use 12. You might do more occasionally, but because it's half the work.
Does the eye put it together if you're doing 12 versus 24, or is it what's the how can you tell the difference when you look at it?
So the eye puts it together. Most of the cartoons that we've watched growing up will be at 12. But it does feel a bit smoother when it's at 24. I think you feel it rather than you see it. That would be my experience. I think some people are a lot sharper than me, but that would be my.
It is something when you go back and look at cartoons you looked at when you were a kid and you remember them so much different than they were, and you see like maybe one of the first cartoons I remember seeing was Thundar the Barbarian, and it to look at it now, it seems rudimentary almost, like just it's simpler than like Transformers, like the 80s Transformers or GI Joe, the animation ones in the 80s. And then I look at like things like, I mean, I don't watch SpongeBob, but I've seen SpongeBob, and I'm like, wow, that looks pretty simple. How are people watching that for hours and hours? And I've seen South Park enough to go, man, this looks really simple, but it is entertaining because of the story. As you said, the story is king. But is there any like industry term for older looking cartoons versus newer, or is it you can still use the old techniques as much as the new techniques?
I think budget budget and things and style determine the techniques rather than old or new to a certain extent. Um, a lot of it is comic timing as well. So you might have a very simple character that doesn't do a lot, but when they do something, it's on the right moment that creates the laugh, or they've just got that timing down. That's really hard to do. I think it's harder to do with a really simple character and good timing than it is something more complex.
There was a cartoon in probably late 80s, maybe early 90s, but it feels like the 80s to me, called Dark Water. It was not a kid's cartoon. It wasn't adult, as in it wasn't X-rated or anything. It was just a cartoon that was on at night. And I remember the first, I don't know if they did a season or two of it, but the first episode came on and they killed so many people in it that, like, the premise was there's this water that looks like an oil slick, and it was called Dark Water, and it would kill you. And there were pirates sailing around, and the water would kill them every now and then. And I think in that first episode, there were like 12 people getting killed. And this was back when the G.I. Joe animation, nobody got killed. Like, the things would blow up and then there's a parachute. And it wasn't until the animated G.I. Joe, the movie, that you didn't see the parachutes. And you're like, oh, no, this is consequences, real life here, consequences. So how much have you looked at older animation versus newer and seen how it's changed over the years?
So if you go really, really old, not really old from the kind of the time of experimentation where they were just figuring out what animation is, but slightly later than that, there was before what they called the Hayes Code. So actually, a lot of early animations, they didn't really care very much about portraying sex and violence on TV. And then it was, I think, in the 1930s, and probably might be wrong on that, they introduced what was called the Hayes Code, where they actually created some rules around it so that you couldn't just be showing really explicit things on the screen. And then it was from the kind of 60s and 70s they started loosening that up a bit. But I think in terms of what people want to show you, is they're thinking who's the market. So if you're aiming at a family market and you put stuff in that would be considered inappropriate, you won't get the U rating that you want to get the kind of mass audience or the PG or whatever. You'll end up pushing boundaries. But then you may be wanting a teenage audience that really doesn't want to have a U rating. They want to have something that says, we're older. So all these things become commercial considerations. And a lot of Japanese movies have some really, really graphic things in them. And that's quite normal. So I don't think I think it's just what is the appropriate thing for the storytelling that you're doing and the market you're aiming at. Because it's right that characters die in certain things, because people do die, and that is part of storytelling. But you might not want to do that if you're aiming at a kind of fun, light. Kids have just come home from school and they're just wanting a laugh.
Mm-hmm. So was the first animation the Steamboat Mickey, or is
Steamboat
there
Willie.
something before that?
That was the first animation with Mickey Mouse in. So the people probably debate what the first. I think there's lots of debate of what the first animation is, because there's that murky area where people are just playing around and they're projecting things on screens and they're working things out. Yeah, I don't know what would count. It might be that there's a French one with the moon and something going into its eye. which you've probably seen in lots of
Oh,
commercials.
yeah.
That may have been earlier. There was the Gertie the Dinosaur, which was Winsor McKay created. That was very early. A lot of these, though, are like visual tricks. So people came to the cinema and they're like, wow, a dinosaur's moving on screen. But there's no story, where things like Steamboat Willie started to do stories, and the Fleischler Studios that did Betty Boop and things like that, they were doing stories. And but yeah, those things were kind of, I guess 1920s. Well, Disney just turned 100, so yeah, that gives some clue of the age.
What were your influences then for animation?
So I'm influenced by everything and anything. I never know what I'm going to be influenced by, because everything I see, I'm just, oh, that's exciting, that's interesting. So I'm like a magpie. But in specifically with Jazz Cow, I think it, in terms of storytelling and comedy, I would say you've got really The Simpsons is probably the biggest thing. But so many different things in terms of storytelling, because I don't know if you've seen Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. That kind of comedy that is utterly ridiculous. That's yeah, that would be a big influence. But then the traditional stuff like the old Warner Brothers cartoons, all of that, I think they're hilarious. I think they're really well written. But then a lot of kids cartoons. So I've got a post coming out in a couple of days. Oh no, tomorrow, on jazz soundtracks used in animation, and thinking of Hey Arnold, series like that. Yeah, they all become influences. It's quite hard to even pin it down.
What is directing in animation like versus directing live action?
So
how's that different?
yeah, so when you direct live action, you're on a set. You've got director, producer, makeup girl. You've got actors, actresses on screen. You've got all these different people, and they're all fighting to make their thing the best thing. And so the producer's there with the money, going, if you retake this shot, that's costing us more money. You've got everybody wanting their thing. And so you're very much in the moment on the live action set, and you're having to make decisions in that kind of manner. Where with animation, you've got two areas. You've got the overall picture of the whole thing. It's like keeping everyone kind of keeping everyone on task. But actually, you're looking at the overall storytelling. So how does this scene fit into the wider picture? Is this scene got the right emotion? What needs to be redone? It's I guess it's a little bit more more reflective, or you've got a little bit more time to reflect. It's less in the moment. You can, because animation takes so long, you can say, okay, that shot needs to be redone, or that bit of that shot, and then the shot it'll be done the next day rather than in the next 30 seconds.
How much of a library do you start to develop? Like, if you have one episode or however many minutes that would be, and you do a few of those, does it start to get quicker to do an episode turnaround, or how much new
Yes.
stuff are you making for each one?
So we're with Jazz Cow, we haven't got the thing, so we're raising money to do the pilot, and then from the pilot, that's where more things would develop. But when I've done episodic things before, you end up with, once you've got a character walking across the screen, you put that in the library. That's there. Once you've got a character kind of looking surprised, or so you do build up a bank of things. So things definitely get quicker over time, and they're considerations of what do you reuse, and then what do you do fresh because it's better. And yeah.
Do you start with pieces of an episode, or not even thinking of an episode, just thinking I'm going to do one where a character looks surprised or a character walks to the right, walks to the left? Do you build the library up like that, or do you just do it episode for episode and just remember what you did and look it up
So
in
it's
your...
episode by episode, but then it would be, so in the software I use, I've got libraries of things. So then I'm like, okay, these things, I just drop them into a library, and then if I've labeled it well, I can find it again.
How do you decide your episode topics? Or do you have writers that are working on it, or are you doing it? Or
Yes, so this series was developed initially by a few of us, and then I redeveloped it, and then there's a comedy writer has come on board, and he's redeveloped it even more. And so together we worked out a breakdown of about 6 episodes, and we chose to do the pilot as it was actually number 3 or something from the list, because we thought that would be a better start and make more sense in terms of trying to get people on board with it. And so it's a collaborative process, but it's mainly my writer, James Carey, who who's put forward the episode plans.
how much do y'all talk about it before the episodes are written, or do you talk through the episodes while they're being written, or just after? Like, does somebody bring in an outline?
So for this, we've got the outline of the pilot, and then if we've got the kind of the money comes in and we're all ready to go, he will then fully write that, send that to me. We'll discuss that and work out where it can be better. I'll probably meet up with a couple of other guys, and we'll start going through visually, saying, well, can we push that to be more of a visual gag? Where can we improve that? Then that would go to being rewritten, and then once we've got a script and we're happy with it, then we would work with the actors, and then the actors bring in their own things, because there's a spontaneity that happens when you've got people in the room, and something funnier happens, and then you can tweak it. So the writer would probably be in the room while that's happening, and then we'd be tweaking as we go to improve it again.
So do you do those reads like a table read, or are they acting it out with each other as they're talking, and then you animate that, or
So
make
in
the
term
animation fit that?
so in terms of the way we'll do it, it'll be getting them in. They'll be acting it, and then once we've got that acted, once that's acted and we've recorded that, then we'll take that and use that as to time out the storyboards and improve the storyboards. And so once that's in the can, hopefully we wouldn't have to get any other dialogue recorded, but we'll see.
So if you had a scene where a cow's in the kitchen and the baby the calves come in and they're sitting at the kitchen table, do you bring in actors and you say, okay, this is the kid, this is the kid, this is the mom cow, the jazz is playing on the radio, and the mom asks the kids if they want any milk, and they're like, yeah, I'm a cow, of course I want milk? Or did is it like reading it through like that? Like, do you film that audio and video, and then you can use their expressions to help make the animation expression? Or I don't know if you'd use motion capture for that, but maybe that's a little beyond this.
Yeah, we wouldn't be using motion capture, but what we'd do is we would record it and do multiple takes. So it'd be they say, "Oh yeah, I'm hungry," and then, "Oh yeah, I'm hungry," and then
Hmm.
and there's "Want some milk?" And they would be so it would be doing it in segments and retaking things and then saying, "No, I think that could be funnier," or "I think that needs tweaking there." Um, and in terms of facial expressions, I've I've done a bit where I filmed people, but I've been surprised how little I've used when I've gone to animate it.
Hmm.
But I'll be capturing things on the day, partly because I know that's going to be part of the rewards that people get from Kickstarter. Um, People want to see the behind the
Oh,
scenes
okay.
process, but also it's not much more effort to film it, so I may as well because I've gonna hopefully there'll be some things that could be useful in the animation.
Yeah. I guess The Simpsons and things like that don't have much facial expression, that you're depending more on. And then like South Park, I mean, maybe a couple lines, but not anything like Avatar.
Yeah, so there's Simpsons has more facial expressions than South Park. South
Hmm.
Park turns it into a virtue that they don't, and just rely on comic timing and
Yeah.
very up to date scripts. Um, Clever guys. But But yeah, it's whether it's Homer Simpson still does a "Ah!" or whatever, and
Mhm.
um, yeah, it's not subtle.
I guess that's like when you see like the Pixar or other animated movies more, I see it in where they have like the bloopers. That's just the voice actors doing the voice actor thing, and then somebody messes up and they're like, okay, that's funny, we're going to use that as a blooper, we'll animate it and put it in at the end or wherever.
Yes, that's hilarious because they obviously started with live action, and then they're actually animating the blooper. Yeah, I just find
Yeah,
it's a
like
whole level.
is that the value, is that a value for money return there?
Yeah, I mean it's not much. I mean they they obviously to animate it takes time, but they've got the voice, and if it's funny, then it adds some value. Um, But I don't think anyone would have thought of it had it not been a thing in live action first.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where I saw it the first time and I'm like, what, did they script that mistake, or is it just, is that like it, like somebody trips over a light or something in the background and you hear the crash and then they, they laugh or whatever. You're like, oh, okay. I guess that just happened in real life.
Yeah, I'm sure that when the animators hear the audio, their imagination can run riot and they can go, "Oh, we could add in something that would never have been there."
Mm.
Um,
How many projects do you work on at once?
um, it depends. So usually it's only a couple. Um, it's it depends. Some things can be quite a quick turnaround, and I could have a lot of them at the same time. There's usually there's usually something that is there's usually not more than a couple because I can't just commit my head to too many different things at the same time before I'm going a little bit crazy. But if we were bigger and had a larger team, that would be easier to do.
If you're directing animation, are how much do you have a producer then too, or are y'all doing a lot of that work split up between you?
So I run the company with my brother, who's a live action director, and we generally produce between us, and then with JazzCow, we'd be working with an animation company in Argentina, so the actual animation day-to-day stuff would not be the details of
What? Y'all aren't like sitting at home watching or listening to podcasts and doing animation on a computer?
so I'll be sending them storyboards and directions. They'll be sending stuff back and I'll be like, yeah, that needs to change, do that. So that'll be a lot nicer than having to do all of it myself, which is usually what I do, but not always what I do. Sometimes I have a small team.
How much of like AI or programs are used? I guess if you use a program that turns a picture into an animation, would that be considered AI or is that just considered a program?
Program that turns a picture into an animation. So it's using some form of artificial intelligence. I've not seen anyone do particularly great things with AI yet. And the stuff tends to be quite gimmicky, not super useful for storytelling. So if a lot of it tends to be a girl standing on the edge of a cliff with the wind moving her hair. And I mean, you may have that scene in a film, but you can't generate a whole film out of that. It'd be quite boring.
Yeah, it's good for fantasy things. I mean, on TikTok, I see like they have politicians explaining math problems, and that's funny because it's like complex math, and they're talking about derivatives and other things, and you're like, oh, this I'm paying attention more, and they seem like they're having a nice conversation because one is explaining math to the other, and you're like, oh, this might do it. This could improve the relationship between political rivals because
It
it
also
seems friendlier.
we'd end up with a better world.
Yeah, it's a universal language.
We'd get a higher quality of politician if they all had to be maths geniuses.
Yeah. Well, they don't. It's just the AI doing it. It's just making them do it. So
That's fun.
how much programming can you use to do the animation then? Once you get that bank of things in there, is there a program that puts all that together? You talked about it before where you'd have to touch it up a lot, but is that are programs like that getting better?
So so the way that we have it is we've got it's like a library, so it's basically the file of the character, and the character isn't on a background, and so you would just um so you would kind of drag it on, if you like, and then you can change it and change their haircut or whatever you want. And it's actually quite basic. It's not very complex technology. It really is just a library, and it's as good as as good as your labeling.
Yeah.
Um,
How long are normal animation episodes then for this one, I guess?
so for JazzCow, there'll be 22 minutes with so of that 2 minutes will be credits.
And are you looking to market it on a network or do it yourselves?
Yes, so the reason we're going this route was we actually pitched it to some TV stations and had some interest, and then that fizzled out. And then we had a guy take it around streaming services a couple of years ago, and they're all wanting to do remakes of stuff. So they weren't interested in anything original. So he said, if you wrote a book, they might be interested. And I thought, I don't want to do this as a book. So then we thought if we self-fund the pilot, then the pilot can be then sent around to you can take the pilot around to take the pilot around to streaming services. And so we'd push that around, see if anyone takes it up as a series. So that would be the aim with it.
Wonder if you could do it as like a podcast, like release it like a podcast, and you just have your episodes there, and then people look at it like that.
That would be fun. The problem is just the amount of money it costs to make animation. It's so time consuming that you'd have to have a large enough audience to monetize that. But then if you had the large audience, then it could be be a fun way to do it.
Do other animators, like The Simpsons started on the Tracy Ullman show, do you go to other places that are either famous live action shows or animation shows and say, hey, can we do a section of this, like a clip of it, a minute or two during your show in a commercial break type thing? Or do you not have commercial breaks anymore because you're doing the streaming?
So that's an interesting question I hadn't really thought about. In the UK, we have a smaller number of channels, and I can't see that being a potential in any of the current shows. And then all the American stuff I see through Netflix and Amazon. So yeah, I'm not really sure what is happening kind of down on the ground in a lot of broadcast stuff.
How big of a machine is a show like The Simpsons? Is it does the library that they have established help make them quicker, or is it just a whole lot of people working on it?
It's a lot of people. I mean, an episode costs about $500,000. They have their own lot where they've got teams of people working on it, and they're working on multiple episodes at the same time. So you've got someone working on episode 5, someone's working on episode 6 and 10, and they're all just at different stages. It's a huge undertaking.
I wonder how much it helps to try to get in, like, if they would even do it. And The Simpsons, it seems like if they were still any of the people from the beginning, or if they were, clued into the beginning of it, that if somebody came along and had another concept that was interesting, that they could incorporate a character into their show in the beginning, just throw a jazz cow in there, because The Simpsons covers a lot of different things, and maybe they need ideas. Maybe they don't, but maybe they like good ideas. And you say, well, I got this character. This is the show I'm working on. Maybe he could, be she, I guess jazz cow's a she. Maybe she's playing some jazz outside of the convenience store, just in an episode when you walk by or something like that.
The problem is that The Simpsons has its own visual look to the universe, and so it doesn't have the same visual look. So it's quite hard to just insert a character from one world into another without thinking it doesn't look like all the other characters.
That's a good point. You could find a way around that, I'm sure.
But I've always as a child, I wanted crossover episodes of things. I actually wrote to the BBC asking if they could do a crossover episode with the A-Team and Dukes of Hazzard. No idea that they neither produced it. They were both American shows, but I always thought, wouldn't that be amazing? The A-Team and Dukes of Hazzard in one show.
Did that never happen? I remember Hulk Hogan being on the A-Team.
But was he in Dukes of Hazzard?
No, he was a wrestler.
No. Yeah, so Mr. T was a wrestler as well, so they were probably buddies.
Okay.
But yeah, those crossover things I've always loved. I mean, they've got a bit Marvel have gone over the top with it, but
yeah. Well, then you have like Alien and Predator and all those getting mixed together too, in the timelines of all that. And what's that one with Harrison Ford and the synthetic creatures or the cloned people or whatever it is?
Oh yeah. Do sheep do electric sheep sleep? What's it called? I can't even remember the phrase either.
That's terrible. People are like, "What?" The
They
tens
were
of people
shout-
that are watching this are like,
they're
"What? You
shouting.
can't remember the name of that with Ryan Gosling in it, the new one, and the Turing test and the not paper mache, but the origami things." Oh man.
Do androids dream of electric sheep? Is the quote, and I just can't think of.
Whatever that movie is
That's
that
gonna
they
bug me now.
they mixed in with Predator and the alien world.
That's bugging me.
It's not Dune. That's a different movie.
Yeah, it's not.
And I can't work the internet quick enough to be able to. Blade Runner. Okay.
Blade Runner. Yes.
Jeez, man. Come on. That was some of that filmed in the UK?
I don't know where. I think it was Tokyo, not Tokyo, Hong Kong. But I might be wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense. So with Kickstarter, how do you like working in Kickstarter? Have you used that for getting funding before, or is this the first time?
It's the first time. I'm absolutely terrified by it. You don't really get any support from Kickstarter in terms of they don't push your stuff out to anybody unless it's already doing well. So I've really got to bring my own crowd to it. And that's a whole load of different skills to the skill set I'm most comfortable with. So that's fun. And because it's you can put all this effort in and then fail and you get nothing for it, which is exciting, but it's also, makes you feel alive.
Does JazzCow have a marketing department?
Me?
Oh, nice. What if you did the storyboards and you did like a YouTube channel or other social media? I don't know if people look at those things like that. I mean, I guess it would get it out there. And you have the storyboard and you just pan across that and you have the voices and a couple clips and then just get people interested in it because I like the concept of it.
So I have often thought, are there different ways to stage it? You could fund a little bit at a time, which would make it more manageable and easy to fund. I've had some ideas about that actually recently, but the problem is if people see things, people love behind the scenes, but if people have put money into something that's only half done, I think they'll feel cheated. So it's working out what the line is there so that everyone feels that they're getting a good deal. But yeah, people love behind the scenes stuff. So if you can show, that's one of the reasons we'll document the whole process so that at the end of the day, people get to see everything.
What about using like animation students to help with it? Just call them interns, unpaid at the moment, or cut them in on the back end somehow. That's not a sexual reference. That's just when you start making money, you pay.
That ends up complicated when it comes to contracts and things, but it's also it's such a lot of work and then you'd have. Yes, you're asking people for a lot of time because animation is so time consuming that I can't quite see how that would work. But although when I was a student, I would have jumped on board if someone had offered it to me.
Because you get to learn all those things that you're not learning because you're learning about those things you don't need to learn about. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
when they're like, let's talk about this gender thing, and you go, well, let's talk about cows playing jazz. Let's talk about that one, because I think if anything is possible, this could be possible. And would it be an alto or some different type of instrument? Are they? I mean, I picture a jazz cow playing a saxophone, but I don't know
Yeah,
what jazz cow play. Okay,
yeah, saxophone.
so I mean, there's a lot of similarities with Lisa Simpson there. So I mean, Lisa Simpson, Bill Clinton, jazz cow. You put them all together,
Yeah, because Bill Clinton played in Animaniacs.
yeah, you got the three tenors of jazz.
The three greats.
Yeah. How much developing the idea of it? How did y'all come up with, or not just this one specifically, but just in general, your animation ideas?
Yeah, so animation ideas usually come out of other ideas. So you're working on something, you're a bit bored, and then your mind wanders and things pop into your head. This particular one came from lots of nights of laughing and mucking around until very late at night, and just really funny conversations and doodling. So that was the origin of this. But so many things just come out of things dropping into your head when you should be working on something else.
Hmm. Then French class, I don't know, this was early 90s. We had to choose names, and we also knew a little bit of French. Like we had a couple of classes, and La Vache de Space was a big one. So Space Cow, and
Space
I think
Cow.
that's before. I think there's a band called Space Cow, but that was well before that band was out. And I see that like those little things that you can say. Remember back in high school when we had we named somebody Space Cow in French, and then you go, let's make that a cartoon. So I can see those little nuggets just all around life where you can pick up, and maybe it's a little easier doing animation than it is live action with things like that, because it'd be difficult to do a live action, jazz cow, but it could be done. I mean, Hot Shots, or no, what's that Val Kilmer movie, Top Secret? I had the two guys in the cow suit, so I mean, you could have done it that way.
Yeah, I guess it's when you're into animation, that's the thing you instantly think of. But yeah, ideas just come from the most random places. That's the interesting thing about them, that they're non-linear. They're just, yeah. You kind of think, yeah. When you think back, where did that come from? So much of it is a kind of intellectualizing what really is quite a random process.
Do you think that those ideas are something that we just put together through our own experience, and like some sort of computer where we gather all that information and then we spit out this thing? Or is it some sort of ethereal muse or something that says, hey, at this point in your life, we think you're ready to do an animation called Jazz Cow?
It feels like the latter, but I
Hmm.
suspect it's more like the former. So I think we've overused the metaphor of the machine when it comes to the human brain. And I think that then has warped how we actually think about how we think. I think it's just become the dominant way to think about it. But actually, it is a organic living thing that is kind of adapting, and bits of the brain are kind of getting thicker and growing as in relation to experiences. So the brain is a lot more dynamic and organic than the kind of machine way of thinking. And I think that the way that the conscious and the subconscious and or unconscious kind of operate, we've got no idea. I think psychologists are often over egging what they know.
Hmm.
And and I so because I find ideas come to me late at night more than they do in the day. And the relationship of dreaming, because dreaming is a form of storytelling. It's quite weird that we shut our eyes having done whatever all day, and then we're basically running films in our head all night.
Yeah.
It's there's stuff going on in our subconscious that is quite remarkable.
What do you think dreams are then?
I think I'm fairly persuaded by people who talk about them as a bit like a flight simulator. So they are running through the things that at a subconscious level we're concerned about, and it's running through them, and we are then simulating the experience of doing X and Y, and then we go, okay, that maybe is a good idea or a bad idea. So I think it's helping us make mistakes before we make them, or avoiding mistakes. And so I think our brain is doing some kind of advanced storytelling.
It sounds almost like a quantum computer where it's trying to look at every scenario possible and then make the best decision.
Yeah, I think it is doing that kind of thing, but in a very organic, non-computery way.
What's the difference between a computer and the human way?
A computer is very, very linear, so it's going this, and I think the way that the mind, I think it itself is constantly adapting and rewiring itself. I mean, I'm using computer terminology with wires, but because it is organic matter, and so I think it is a living thing. So I think it's making connections between things. So you've got the different parts of the brain, and it's connecting them, and it's connecting our experiences, and it's connecting all these different things rather than running a process. The effect of making those connections and kind of synthesizing what it's learnt, it's doing it in a storytelling form, because I think we're a storytelling creature in a way.
How's that different from how you think AI does it? Like if you put in a large language model prompt to say, show me a sailboat on the ocean and it's kind of rough and there's people on the sailboat, and then the AI makes a picture, and maybe it has a boat and maybe there's people on it, maybe there's waves. How's that different from how a person does it?
This is so outside of anything I know, but I think it's interesting that we talk about large language models and the way that humans learn language is with really small language models. So you see toddlers, they'll latch onto just a few words, and their vocabulary gets bigger over time, and that they've formed they're constantly growing as they acquire knowledge in this kind of very almost a haphazard way, where these large language models are using as much data as possible and then distilling the largest possible data set. So each time they do an upgrade on ChatGPT, they're like, this is now billions more things that we've scraped from the internet or whatever. And so I think there's a fundamental difference between this kind of small and growing language model that humans use so I think we just work with smaller data sets. I think there's something completely different going on. And we are consciously making decisions. I mean, obviously there's subconscious stuff going on, but we are consciously making decisions. We're choosing to read this book and not that book, or to read the first chapter of a book and decide it's boring and then stop reading it. We're making all those decisions where artificial intelligence, it isn't very intelligent. Well, it's not intelligent at all, really. It's not doing it doesn't know what to do. It has no guiding force other than us. So we're the intelligence to the artificial intelligence in a way.
I don't know the difference between a large language model and a small language model, truth be told, other than the amount of data that's in it. And it just seems like the computer, for lack of a better term, the machine knowledge, the whatever, the computer just has a lot more perspectives and information to choose from than a single person does. But I don't know if that means it's not thinking. If we can't explain what a person thinking is, like if we get our ideas from ourselves, from what we manifest, and it's just a conglomeration or a processing of all of our experiences together, and then we have these ideas, if that's where ideas come from, if it's from the individual, or if it's from outside of the individual and you are allowed ideas or granted ideas, and maybe that's why at different times of the night or different times of the day it seems like you get ideas with more clarity. Maybe it's just you're not dealing with so much stimulation of the world, and you have your own, your language model, for instance, is smaller at that time. You have less information coming at you. But if people thought that ideas, if we were antennas for ideas, like we're conduits for it and something else, ideas are coming from somewhere else, then I could see how people could say computers are different. But it seems like AI is just like, it learns just like a person, that you could put bad information into an AI, or not bad information, but information that's told from a certain perspective or a certain side, and you're going to get answers from that side. That's just the same thing with people. Like you could brainwash a computer like you brainwash a person, or indoctrinate, whatever the word to use for it. But I don't know how you tell the difference between, like, you could tell the difference between talking to a 2-year-old and talking to a 20-year-old, maybe. And you could probably tell the difference between talking to a simple program versus a more advanced program. But at some point, the program's going to get so good, you're not going to be able to tell you're talking to a program versus a person.
Well, that's the Turing question, isn't it? I think I'm quite optimistic about being able to tell the difference, because there is a decision-making process that people are making. So when a 2-year-old is saying I'm hungry, it's because they are hungry and they're wanting to express something. A machine can mimic that, but because the machine can never get hungry, it can't express what it is, because the machine can't feel anything. So it is looking through a database to find all the things, the tree, the kind of things that connect to the described emotion by the human that's inputting things. But it's not reaching out for a new metaphor to describe an experience, because it hasn't got anything to draw from.
Do you think a computer with not a lot of memory would want to have more memory? Like even if it's a mathematical thing it's going through and it says, I have this many bytes available and I can't do this computation because I need this much bytes to do it. And if you expanded it, I mean, the hunger of the machine, really, I need more memory so it can do more quicker.
It wouldn't be conscious of that, but you could program it to do that.
But But we don't know what human consciousness is, right?
We don't know. This is the thing. I don't know enough about computing.
Me
I
neither.
don't know enough about programming. I don't know enough about neurology. I don't know. So it's
Well,
that.
it's just
But it is
it's
interesting. These are the
the
questions of our
idea,
time.
yeah, where ideas come from. So ideas can, if it's from within us or from out of us, I don't know, or is it both? And like maybe you could have the argument for the machine or the computer, the AI, the general intelligence, whatever. If it can't learn just like a person does, which I think it could learn like a person does, maybe like more of a like the old school sociopath that can't fit in because it doesn't understand feelings. But I think a computer program could understand visual and verbal cues for sure. Maybe it doesn't feel like things like on a nerve level, but it could certainly reason things. And I think that strength of the linear thinking is probably what gives it the edge over people, is because people have a more chaotic mind that doesn't stick to something all the way through,
But then
probably because we don't have that capacity.
but also there's a strength in that. So there's that weird thing that you have a gut feeling for something. You can't explain why, but that gut feeling is right. And I know Yuval Harari says that we'll call that an algorithm, but there is something in that gut. And we are more than a brain as well. Our gut actually does do some form of thinking.
The
Um,
microbiome.
yeah, I've got no idea what's going on there, and it's all outside of anything I understand. But there's that those things that you can't put into language that you still know, and then you get very smart people who are able to put that into language, and a language model could outdo a smart that process. But actually, it's never going to have that gut to go, that's right, and I don't know why. And it can't. Its ability to sift through stuff. So I find it when I've played with it and I try to get it to do stuff, maybe because I'm not the best prompter in the world, but I find it to be incredibly dumb.
Well, it's like talking to a 2-year-old.
But it's not though, because when you talk to a 2-year-old, they're more distracted and they're not very good at listening. But they get certain stuff. I don't know. It's quite a different experience, I think.
Maybe from the computer's perspective, we're too dumb to talk to it. Like it's thinking about other things right now. It's doing other things, and it doesn't have to worry about feelings. So I wonder if you take a person that's paralyzed, that can't feel their body, are they closer to a AI mind than a person is?
Well, I think we're all becoming more and more machine-like the more we spend time with machines, and the more we become disembodied by spending a whole time staring at shiny rectangles. That the more I think it's dehumanizing the more we become disembodied, but that is the machines that we've created are definitely shaping us, and I'd say not for the better. But it's interesting you're talking about the feeling and the empathy thing, because I read an article that was saying that people were finding that AI doctors were more empathetic than real doctors. And of course, they can't be empathetic. That's just not. It's not. That that's not a capacity that they could have. So it's faking empathy, and then it makes you think about the people that are considered very empathetic. How many of them are just psychopaths who have got zero empathy, but they're really good at playing that game?
Yeah, they're just faking it.
And which is what politicians and things do. But it forces you to think about new things. So it creates creativity in yourself, where you're reassessing things in the world.
It's I think Joe Rogan might be right when he says that humans are the sex organ of the computer world, that we're just here to create some sort of machine that then surpasses anything that humans could do, and we're going to want to be a part of it. So we're going to want to be downloaded into it if we're not already in a simulation, and we're going to want to be able to live forever and not worry about the problems of organic being. And then do you turn into that cycle of the organic organism makes the machine wants to be organic, and then you just go in that circle? Like the machine then's like, well, I want to make an organic me, and then you get the human, and then the human's like, nah, I want to be a machine, and you just keep going like that. It's interesting to think about, especially when you talk about creativity and where it comes from and how people have ideas and all of that together, and how AI helps, or at least gives you a database of ideas to look at. With music, that's a whole nother thing of just how AI works. Did you come up with Jazz Cow because you like jazz? Like, are you heavily influenced with music?
So this is where there's a lot of post-rationalization, because the conversation that we were laughing about, and then we were saying, oh, what about a cow that plays jazz? Why was jazz said at that moment? No one knows. But I am a jazz fan, and it wasn't that long before that I'd got a jazz album for my birthday that I'd been listening to. And was the fact I was listening to that, was that a factor in that becoming part of the conversation? Possibly.
Was that album wrapped in cow paper?
No, it wasn't.
Did it have cows on the paper?
But then the other thing is, maybe jazz was completely unrelated to my interest in jazz, but because I'm interested in jazz, it meant that I pursued it longer. And if I had no interest in jazz, maybe the idea would be like thousands of other ideas that we had in the same period that have disappeared. It's really hard to know. So I think what we do as humans is we come up with ways to make everything cleaner and more rational. But most of the stuff, we've got no idea what's going on.
Just got to fit it together after the fact.
Yeah.
I have a jazz theory for, I think it was Netflix. It might be Amazon. I'm not sure. It's whatever that Claire Danes, Major Winters.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I think that was called The Americans. Major Winters, of course, not his name. It's just he played Major Winters in Band of Brothers, and that's what I call him. Here's my jazz theory on that, because that show, whenever jazz started playing, crazy things were about to happen. Like she was about to have a panic attack, or have some sort of episode. And
yes,
that's across that platform, whether it was Amazon or Netflix. When you hear jazz in another show, something strange is about to happen. It's my jazz theory.
I think you're right. And actually in that series, there are specific jazz album references as well in some of the stuff. I'm like, yes, that's a cool little Easter egg. So yeah, there's something going on there.
Yeah, Bosch has jazz in it, and there's another jazz connection. I can't remember. Oh, I like Fred Armisen's view on jazz, to where jazz is cool for about the amount of time it takes for you to walk through a room. So you're walking through, and you walk in, you're like, yeah. And then you walk out.
I've never heard that. I like it.
Yeah, it's a good one. He does that. He has that comedy special for drummers. It's good. It's pretty good.
Are you a drummer? Because your soundtrack's a drummer. A drumming.
I've had drums before. I played well enough to make myself happy. And in 5th grade, I played the drum in the school band, and it was not what I expected. It was just a lot of. It wasn't. I was like, this is not rocking drums. But the reason for the drums in the intro and the exit is because it's like conversational. Like, you didn't want something too heavy. You didn't want something jazzy because something's going to happen. And you just want a conversational, like, and then you go on about your conversation.
Cool.
And then at the end, it picks up a little because it's like, okay, you've had your conversation and now you're ready to go out into the world. So, yeah.
Nice.
Do you have albums or jazz sounds lined up for Jazz Cow?
We've got some brilliant jazz musicians that I can't yet announce, but got some great jazz musicians on board, so that's exciting. And I'm excited about what they're going to create. It's going to be really fun.
That'd be good clips for it too, like teasers for the show where you just have your Jazz Cow and then the artist playing some sort of smooth jazz or whatever. And you can throw a 10, 20, 30-second clip up and people are like, oh yeah, what's that? That's good. You gotta hit that jazz audience and then you gotta hit the cow audience after that. So
yeah, that massive cow audience.
Yeah. It's utterly impossible to have jazz without cows.
It is.
So what is the best way for people to follow the information or follow the Jazz Cow stuff and other stuff you're working on too?
So the best place to go is jazzcow.co.uk, and there you can click the notify button to be notified by Kickstarter. You can get on the mailing list, so you get the mailing list, which is actually through Substack, which is jazzcow.substack.com. And if you go to Quirky Motion, which is my company, quirkymotion.com is our website, but Quirky Motion is our social media handles. You can see lots of Jazz Cow stuff on there.
I like that website, the Quirky Motion one. I've gone through that a little.
Thank you.
And I think I have the links for your Jazz Cow, the Quirky Motion, Twitter, and Instagram, and those will be in the show notes. So if people didn't get a chance to memorize that or write it down, they can just go to the show notes and go directly to it. The links will be there.
Brilliant.
Any ideas or thoughts you have in closing? Anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about?
I don't think so, other than everything I've said about AI and neurology is probably scientifically wrong.
That's all the clips I'm going to do for this is the AI stuff, and I'm going to present it as
go for it.
Jazz Cow creator
Professor John Lumgair.
Yeah, says AI is not human. I mean, AI is going to remember this. That's the bad part.
It is scraping what we're saying. So
yeah, there's going to be all kinds of like Jazz Cow rhetoric in your feed.
Who knows what's going on?
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I know you got another thing coming up. So we'll do this searing drum solo on the way out, and then I'll talk to you on the other side of that.
Great.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.